Throughout history, the British throne has been more than a seat of political power. It has been a stage where superstition, prophecy, and the shadow of the occult played out alongside royal decrees and battles. For some monarchs, ruling wasn't just a matter of diplomacy or war, it was a dance with fate itself, guided by astrologers, alchemists, and mystics who claimed to read the future. From secret midnight consultations with court magicians to the careful interpretation of ancient prophecies, these rulers placed as much faith in the stars as they did in their armies. Some sought these visions to secure their reign, others to protect themselves from assassination, and a few to justify acts that would change the course of history. But the line between wisdom and obsession is thin, and history remembers both the glory and the downfall of those who tried to bargain with destiny. Today we step into the candlelit chambers of 7 British monarchs whose rule was deeply intertwined with prophecy and the dark allure of magic. We're starting with a ruler who kept a certain mystical consultant on speed dial. Let's just say the crown wasn't their only source of power. Elizabeth I, one of the most iconic monarchs in British history, was not just a political mastermind. She was also a queen who placed deep trust in the mysterious and the magical. Behind the polished image of the Virgin Queen stood a man who would become synonymous with her reign's mystique, Dr. John Dee, mathematician, astrologer, and self-proclaimed conjurer of angels. Dee was no ordinary court advisor. To Elizabeth, he was a guide to the hidden forces that might shape her fate. He selected the date of her coronation based on astrological calculations, believing that the alignment of the stars would bless her rule. In his private chambers, Dee conducted scrying sessions, peering into crystal balls and black obsidian mirrors in search of visions from other realms. Elizabeth's England was a place of both Renaissance learning and medieval superstition. While the Queen encouraged science and the arts, she also valued the old belief that the heavens could foretell the destiny of kings and nations. Dee's role was delicate. He had to avoid accusations of witchcraft in an era when such charges could mean death, while still providing the Queen with the otherworldly guidance she craved. Their alliance was more than personal curiosity. It was political strategy. Elizabeth's enemies, both foreign and domestic, were numerous. The Queen used Dee's predictions as a psychological weapon, subtly spreading word of favorable prophecies to inspire loyalty and fear. She understood that power was not only maintained through armies and laws, but also through the belief that her rule was divinely ordained and cosmically protected. Yet the Queen was pragmatic. She never allowed prophecy to overrule her political instincts. Dee's visions were a tool, not a chain. In the end, Elizabeth's reign became one of the most stable in English history, but her reliance on an astrologer left a fascinating footnote. Even one of Britain's most celebrated rulers could not resist looking to the stars for reassurance. Our next royal didn't just dabble in the occult, they went on a full-blown crusade against it. Spoiler, paranoia and politics make a wild cocktail. James VI of Scotland, who later became James III of England in 1603, is remembered not only for uniting the crowns of Scotland and England, but also for his deep and often obsessive fixation on witchcraft, prophecy, and the unseen forces he believed lurked in the shadows. His fear of the supernatural was born during a stormy chapter of his life. In 1589, James travelled to Denmark to marry Anne of Denmark. On their return voyage, violent storms nearly sank their ship. The young king became convinced it was no accident but the work of witches conspiring against him. This belief sparked the infamous North Berwick witch trials, where dozens were accused and many executed after brutal interrogations. James didn't just rely on superstition, he formalized it. In 1597, he authored Demonology, a treatise on witchcraft, magic, and demons. In it, he declared that witches were real, dangerous, and enemies of God and king alike. This book was not some royal pastime, it served as a justification for witch hunts across his kingdoms, fueling fear and hysteria. Despite his fear of witches, James was paradoxically drawn to the occult's intellectual side. He maintained an interest in prophecy and was known to study astrological charts, believing the stars could reveal divine truths. Yet his fascination was rooted in control, not wonder. To James, understanding the hidden world meant mastering it and protecting himself from it. At court, his reputation as a king divinely protected from dark forces was carefully cultivated. Prophecies that painted him as a chosen ruler were spread to strengthen his legitimacy, especially in England, where he was still a relative outsider. But this obsession came at a cost. His witch hunts left a bloody mark on his reign and on the lives of countless innocents. James I's legacy is a paradox. He was a learned monarch who commissioned the King James Bible, yet he also clung fiercely to fears of magic and prophecy. In his mind, these forces were not relics of a superstitious past, but very real threats and sometimes tools in the dangerous game of kingship. Coming up, a sovereign who treated prophecies like life instructions, right up until those predictions started sounding a little too much like spoilers. Mary Stuart, better known as Mary, Queen of Scots, lived a life steeped in intrigue, romance, and tragedy. And prophecy was never far from her mind. From her youth in the glittering French court to her final days in an English prison, Mary surrounded herself with soothsayers, astrologers, and whispered promises of a destiny preordained by the stars. Her fascination with prophecy began during her marriage to Francis II of France. The French court buzzed with talk of Nostradamus, whose cryptic verses seemed to predict the fates of kings and queens. Mary, young and impressionable, took these words to heart, interpreting them as signs of her own grand future. She believed she was destined to unite the thrones of Scotland, France, and England, a vision that would ultimately lead her into peril. In Scotland, Mary's reliance on prophecy only deepened. Political instability and personal loss drove her to seek reassurance from astrologers who promised that her enemies would fall and her reign would flourish. One notorious prediction claimed that she would wear 3 crowns before death, a prophecy Mary clung to even as her power crumbled. But prophecy, like politics, is a dangerous game. When she fled to England seeking protection from her cousin Elizabeth III, Mary was still convinced destiny was on her side. She saw herself as the rightful heir to the English throne, and Catholic factions across Europe fueled this belief with promises that God and fate favored her claim. Her downfall came when letters and plots linked her to conspiracies against Elizabeth. Even then, Mary reportedly told her attendants that her death would only confirm the truth of earlier prophecies, that her bloodline would rule England. She was executed in 1587, yet, in a sense, her prophecy came true. Her son, James II of Scotland, would inherit the English crown in 1603. Mary's life stands as a haunting reminder that belief in prophecy can be both a comfort and a curse. For her, destiny was a constant companion, guiding her choices and leading her straight to the executioner's block. The next monarch thought the stars were negotiable. Unfortunately for them, celestial bodies don't respond well to royal ultimatums. Henry VIII is remembered for his 6 wives, his break with the Catholic Church, and his larger-than-life personality, but behind the political and personal drama, he also harbored a deep belief in astrology and prophecy. In his turbulent reign, the stars were not just distant lights in the sky. They were guides, warnings, and at times excuses for his most consequential decisions. Henry kept a close circle of astrologers at court, often consulting them before embarking on military campaigns or making key political moves. He was particularly interested in auspicious dates for coronations, treaties, and even marriages. It is said that astrologers played a role in choosing the date of his wedding to Anne Boleyn, convinced that celestial alignments promised a male heir. History, of course, proved them wrong. His reliance on prophecy extended beyond the stars. Rumors circulated about predictions concerning the Tudor line, that it would end if a male heir failed to secure the throne. This anxiety gnawed at Henry throughout his reign, fueling his desperate quest for a son and the infamous marital changes that followed. Each new wife brought renewed consultations with astrologers, as if the heavens themselves could be persuaded to alter his fate. Henry also used prophecy as a political weapon. When it suited him, he embraced predictions that supported his authority, spreading them through court gossip and public declarations. When prophecy turned against him, such as rumors predicting his downfall, he responded with ruthless suppression, often targeting the messengers themselves. The king's obsession with control extended to the cosmos, but the universe was beyond his command. His later years, plagued by ill health and political unrest, offered no celestial reassurance. When Henry died in 1547, he left behind not the unshakable dynasty he had envisioned, but a fragile succession that would plunge England into instability. For Henry VIII, the stars were both a comfort and a mirror of his own ambitions, bright, powerful, and ultimately untouchable. No matter how many crowns he wore or wives he wed, the heavens remained immune to royal decree. Next, we meet someone who believed prophecy could win wars. The problem? Wars tend to have a mind of their own, prophecies included. Edward IV rose to power in one of England's most turbulent eras, the Wars of the Roses, a time when prophecy was as powerful a weapon as the sword. For Edward, the crown was not just won on the battlefield, it was legitimized in the minds of his followers through visions and predictions that painted him as a ruler destined by fate. From the start, Edward's rise was surrounded by stories of omens. Supporters whispered of prophecies foretelling a king from the House of York who would unite the realm and bring peace. Such beliefs were not idle superstition, they were political tools, rallying Yorkist forces and undermining the claims of his Lancastrian rivals. Edward and his allies skillfully encouraged these prophecies, weaving them into the fabric of his public image. During his reign, astrologers and soothsayers were frequently consulted, especially in matters of war. Chronicles suggest Edward timed certain military campaigns to align with favorable astrological readings, believing the stars could tip the scales in his favor. His most famous victory at the Battle of Towton in 1461 was later wrapped in stories of divine and cosmic approval. But prophecy also brought danger. A notorious example was the so-called G prophecy, which claimed that one of Edward's heirs would be betrayed by someone whose name began with the letter G. This prediction sowed suspicion within the royal family, eventually casting a shadow over his own brother George, Duke of Clarence, who would be executed for treason in 1478. Whether the prophecy drove the king's paranoia or simply served as a convenient justification for removing a rival remains uncertain. Edward's reign mixed brutal realpolitik with a keen awareness of how belief shapes loyalty. He understood that in a kingdom weary of civil war, the image of a ruler blessed by fate was as valuable as victory itself. Yet, like so many before and after him, Edward discovered that prophecy is a double-edged sword. It could lift a man to the throne, but it could also whisper doubts that eroded trust, even within his own bloodline. Now, from victorious predictions to ominous warnings, our next ruler found themselves surrounded by signs that maybe, just maybe, it was time to worry. Richard III's short reign is remembered for political intrigue, whispered crimes, and one of the most infamous battles in English history. But behind the hard edges of power, his story is also shadowed by omens, dreams, and grim prophecies that seemed to stalk him until his final breath. From the moment he seized the crown in 1483, After declaring his nephews illegitimate, Richard's legitimacy was questioned. In such uncertain times, rumours of prophecy swirled like smoke. Supporters of the Lancastrian cause clung to predictions of a king's downfall, some even claiming celestial signs had marked Richard as doomed. Richard himself was no stranger to superstition. Chroniclers recount that before the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, he suffered disturbing dreams, visions of being betrayed by those he trusted most. On the eve of the battle, according to legend, he awoke trembling, convinced the outcome had already been sealed by fate. Some said he dismissed the warnings, others claimed he was deeply unsettled, masking fear with defiance. There were other signs that his contemporaries viewed as ill omens. A wild boar, Richard's heraldic emblem, was reportedly sighted behaving erratically near Leicester before the battle, which was interpreted by locals as a symbol of his coming defeat. Even nature, it seemed, had turned against him. When Bosworth Field became his final stand, Richard fought with desperate ferocity, reportedly cutting down enemies in a bid to reach Henry Tudor himself. But destiny, or at least history, was not on his side. Abandoned by key allies at a crucial moment, he was overwhelmed and killed, becoming the last English king to die in battle. In the aftermath, Tudor propaganda eagerly embraced the omens. Chroniclers wrote of prophetic warnings and supernatural signs as proof that Richard's fall was preordained, framing Henry VII's victory as the fulfillment of divine will. Whether Richard was truly haunted by prophecy or merely crushed by the political realities of his time, his story endures as a tale where fate and politics are so tightly bound that they're impossible to untangle. From the chaos of the battlefield, we move to a ruler who faced their fate in full public view, proving destiny doesn't always send a private invitation. Charles III, the king whose reign ended on the executioner's scaffold, lived much of his life under the shadow of prophecy. From the earliest years of his rule, seers and political enemies alike whispered that his fate was sealed, that he would meet a violent end at the hands of his own people. Charles inherited the throne in 1625, a period already tense with religious divisions and parliamentary disputes. His belief in the divine right of kings, that his authority came directly from God, only intensified his interest in omens and prophecies that affirmed his role as a chosen ruler. At court, astrologers were occasionally consulted, and Charles paid particular attention to predictions that painted him as a defender of the true faith. Yet prophecies about his doom persisted. One attributed to a 16th century soothsayer warned that a king in white would die violently in his own capital. Charles, perhaps dismissing it as superstition, nonetheless became a striking match for the vision. During his execution in 1649, he famously wore a plain white shirt to keep his subjects from seeing him shiver in the cold. Other omens seemed to stalk his reign. Unseasonal storms disrupted his coronation festivities, and strange comets were reported in the years leading up to the English Civil War, phenomena widely interpreted at the time as harbingers of disaster. In the political realm, his rigid stance against Parliament only deepened the belief that he was marching toward a predestined end. Royalists framed his struggle as a test from God. Parliamentarians saw his fall as inevitable justice. By the time the war turned decisively against him, Charles reportedly began to frame his suffering in biblical terms, likening himself to a martyr. When the axe finally fell outside the banqueting house in Whitehall, many saw the act as the ultimate fulfillment of long-whispered prophecies. For his supporters, his death proved his sanctity. For his enemies, it confirmed the downfall that fate had promised all along. Charles I's life and death show how prophecy can become self-reinforcing, feeding a ruler's convictions while simultaneously sharpening the blade of history. 7 reigns, countless omens, and not a single happy ending. Maybe the real prophecy was just that history loves a little drama. From Elizabeth I's calculated consultations with John Dee to Charles III's final walk to the scaffold in a white shirt, the history of the British crown is steeped in tales where destiny and superstition intertwine. These 7 monarchs ruled in eras when prophecy could be as persuasive as politics, and the stars, omens, and whispered visions of mystics carried weight in the corridors of power. For some, like Edward IV and Henry VIII, prophecy was a political tool wielded to inspire loyalty or justify ambition. For others, like Mary, Queen of Scots, and Richard III, it became an obsession that shaped decisions and clouded judgment. And for kings like James V and Charles I, the unseen world was both a fascination and a threat, a realm they sought to understand or control, but could never escape. Their stories remind us that even the most powerful rulers are not immune to the allure of knowing or trying to command the future. In the end, prophecy did not save them, but it left behind a legacy of intrigue that still captures our imagination centuries later.